what's going on, y'all? Eric Moultrie here with COMPARE Conversations. Thanks for joining me today. As you can see on the screen, I'm going to be addressing a discussion between Chris Cuomo and the infamous Don Lemon. The headline here from this article, CNN's Chris Cuomo, Don Lemon, BLM riots more justified than Capitol Hill riot. I will let them talk in this little video clip, and then I'll share my thoughts. If you enjoy my content, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button and share my videos. And before we fire up the video again, what are your thoughts? Do you think BLM was more justified throughout the course of the summer as they caused roughly over 24 lives lost, over $1 billion in damage? Do you think that they're more justified than the Trump supporters and whoever else was involved at the Capitol riot? Comment down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. But we're going to get fired up here, and I'm anxious to share my perspectives.
And it happened for a reason.
Well, they didn't do it. No. They most certainly had. They just haven't done it at the Capitol. They've been doing it all over the country for 7 months.
Overturning the election is different than being pissed off about getting shot by cops.
Well, they were never going to overturn the election, and I give Congress a lot of credit for not delaying a day, just coming back.
But they
when
tried
when
at the direction of this president and others, Ken. It's a big difference, and you're going to have to deal with it next week. Last word.
Yeah, I'm not going to get into that until a little further on into the discussion. I really want to get into the exchange Cuomo had with Don Lemon. And I'm just going to speed up. We're going to get to it.
Right now.
Listen, I don't mind that you're late because that was a very important interview. And listen, I'm glad you mentioned about being shot by cops because you cannot compare this, and I'm sick of people comparing. You can't compare what happened this summer to what happened at the Capitol.
There is a clear comparison. And you're talking about two separate groups of people who feel justified in being angry. Now, I know that there is discussion. There was talk about who all was involved in the riot at the Capitol. The majority of people that went in there, from what we gather, from what we can see, were Trump supporters. Now, were there some BLM and Antifa activists? No question about it. That's already been made clear from some of the video footage and some of the other research and investigations that have happened so far.
I'm Sullivan. I'm from Salt Lake City, Utah. My group is Insurgents USA. We about to burn this shit down. We out there strapped. We out there ready to burn that down. We out there to defend our selves. We gotta defend ourselves now too. We do. Because power to the people. We gotta rip Trump out of that office right over there. Pull him out that shit. Nah, we ain't about waiting until the next election. We about to go get that motherfucker. I ain't about that because you know what time it is? I want y'all to be after me. It's time for a revolution. It's time for a revolution. It's time for a revolution.
It should be noted that Sullivan, who is 26, is facing criminal charges for violent entry, civil disorder, and disorderly conduct for his actions last month. Sullivan's own footage clearly shows him participating in the violence on January 6th and even encouraging others to go along with him, calling on them to burn the building down. Despite Sullivan's extremist ties, CNN then invited the self-proclaimed Antifa member onto their network for an interview following the January 6th protests.
So that's not a debatable point. But when it's all said and done, you have two groups who felt justified in being angry for various reasons. So you have it's easy to make a comparison. Easy to make a comparison. I think there are many ways to respond, and I think that there are appropriate means of letting your voice be heard other than striking out in violence. But we're going to get more specific as time goes on here.
Two different things. One was built on racial justice, on criminal justice, right? On reform, on police not beating up or not police treating people of color differently than they do whites. Okay.
He said one was built on racial justice, on reform, on cops not beating up people of color, basically. That's pretty much what he said in a nutshell. And it was triggered primarily by the George Floyd incident. Now, I don't know what Don Lemon or who he's been listening to, but from my circle, the people that I'm familiar with, cops, non-law enforcement, news reports that I saw during that incident, I saw the George Floyd incident being basically universally panned and denounced as a terrible incident. Now, I know there's debate on George Floyd's physical state, the fact that he had fentanyl in his system and the amount he had was enough to kill him multiple times over. And that's a factor that should not be ignored. But the reality of the visual and the tactic that officer used, the vast majority of people I know vehemently opposed the tactics that were used and were highly critical of the officer, to say the least. And I think that incident caught the attention of the nation. I would even go so far as say that incident caught the attention of the world. And people were ready to have a conversation about necessary police reforms, or at the very least have a discussion, examine to see if these things were needed. So when these riots took place all across the nation, destroying black communities primarily, doing billions of dollars or over $1 billion worth of damage, a loss of approximately 30 lives. When it's all said and done, we can have a conversation about all of these issues. But you're going to compare to me, honestly, when you had, on one end, you had people willing to have a conversation about the issues in policing, potential issues. On one hand, when you have over 1,000 people who sign sworn affidavits, you have researching organizations and groups demonstrating how it's an impossibility for the numbers to switch so dramatically in Joe Biden's favor. When you have investigative groups speaking about how easily hackable these Dominion machines were and are. When you have two former presidential candidates, Elizabeth Warren and Amy Klobuchar, talking about how these same machines, these same voting machines, were dangerous and had the potential for being hacked. And all this evidence, you have hours and hours of sworn testimony, video footage of people pulling out what looks like ballots from underneath desks at the time where there was no one there to monitor what was going on. People taping up windows so the poll watchers aren't allowed to watch. When you have the mainstream media, when you have social media entities, when you have big tech, basically, if you even post something about there being some allegation of voter improprieties, let's say it as that. When you even post about it, them adding a disclaimer or just taking your information down, your video down from YouTube or other social media sites, and you have the mainstream media basically telling these people that they are lying. At the same time, no one being willing to take on and investigate this information. You can understand on one end where people would get angry. Once again, I'm not justifying any violent activities, violent behavior, but you can understand how one group of people could feel justified in being angry. But at the same time, you got BLM on the floor of the NBA games and commercials all over the place and mainstream stars and politicians supporting them. You got politicians and actors bailing out these rioters. Come on now. Stop, dude. Just stop. Seriously. This is a prime example of why I cannot stand the mainstream media news outlets. They are nothing but a propaganda arm of the Democratic Party. That's all they are. Just watch the next few weeks, the next few months when Joe Biden takes office. Watch the stories that come out about him. Now, you may get something that speaks kind of harshly about him because he wasn't that popular. And I think ultimately they're going to want to get Harris in charge. So who knows what'll come about. But if you compare Donald Trump and Joe Biden's first month, just do that. Go back and read some of the old news articles. Compare their first month in office, and you'll see who the mainstream media supports and who they hated. They don't report the facts anymore. They want to dictate what they want you to believe. And it's high time some of y'all out there start paying attention. And man, I'm telling you, I'm sorry I went on a little tirade there, but this whole thing just gets me going. So I'm gonna let the video continue on.
That is not a lie. Those are facts. Go look at them.
There were definitely some situations that went down where the police abused their authority. But once again, the question is always to be asked, needs to be asked, is this an epidemic? Because that's the claim that you get on a consistent basis. So let me just share a little bit of information with you. And I think you might find this somewhat helpful, because I thought it was pretty interesting. What do you typically hear from BLM and Antifa supporters and those people who share that same mindset, share that same ideology? What do you pretty much consistently hear? Well, things are they're no better. They're no better than they were 50 years ago. Well, let's look at that a little deeper. So in 1972, there were 994 police shootings, and there were 66 fatal shootings. And this is just the NYPD alone. In 2010, that number dropped down to 93 and 8 fatal shootings. And I also read a recent report, a recent article, because the NYPD puts out information every year as far as their use of force. In 2019, December 13th, I think was the date of the article, there were 26 police shootings. So we go from 1972, nearly 1,000 shootings, to today, close to today, 26. Don't tell me that things haven't changed. Don't tell me that things haven't improved. You have case law nowadays. You have Graham versus Connor, Tennessee versus Garner in particularly, that deals with deadly force encounters. You have departments nationwide that have use of force policies that dictate how an officer is to use force. When is he justified, when he isn't? And which oftentimes goes even further than Tennessee versus Garner and Graham versus Connor, which are federal mandates. But yet, what do you get when you turn on the TV? Same old rhetoric, same old nonsense meant to fire you up, meant to piss you off, meant to get you going, meant to make sure that you continue to toe the political line. They know what they're doing, and they do it all the time because it works. Let's continue.
What happened at the Capitol on Wednesday was built on a lie perpetrated by the president and the people who support him. So just on...
I already addressed that, so...
on that merit, if you want to call it, it's not comparable. Those things are not comparable, so they should stop doing that and stop this whataboutism or what happened with this. No one has ever gone this far in saying that an election was illegitimate with all the evidence we have that this was that this election was legitimate.
Right.
Whew, these people. Like I wonder if any of them has even taken a moment to examine any of the information. Like any of them. We know the courts didn't, but has any of these guys? I don't even know why I'm asking that. It's pretty clear. They don't care.
So I don't understand, why Ken Cuccinelli and all these people keep going. If the president, he says, I can't imagine.
In a million years.
In a million years.
It just happened last week.
It just happened last week. If he can't imagine it, then the president should come out and say, stop it with the talk about the Capitals, right? The attacks and the protests on the Capitals. There's nothing to protest. It was a legitimate election. Stop.
It wasn't.
Stop it with saying the election was fair and square. There's nothing to protest. Everyone go home. Don't come out and protest. Don't.
I've heard enough. I can't do it anymore. I've watched it already. It makes me want to vomit half the time when I hear these guys talk, because they just do nothing. All they do is just spin every story for their political purposes. And there was a day where the mainstream media, CNN, MSNBC, well, I don't know too much about MSNBC, but there was a day when these guys actually cared about journalism. But as I've said once, and I'll say it 1,000 times, journalism is long dead as far as the mainstream goes. Me personally, I prefer to get my information from independent news sources, people who actually care about reporting what went down, who actually care about the facts, who actually care about truth. Anyway, once again, I want to know what you guys think. If the information that I shared earlier was a little off, because I'm just going off to the top of my head, just trying to remember what I said, what I read yesterday, forgive me, but I'll post the link of the article in the comments below. But man, I want to know what you guys think about all this. Like, what are your thoughts? Do you guys feel the same way I do? Or do you think I'm totally off base? And if you do, let me know why. I'd love to hear it. Thanks for joining me. In the meantime, stay safe, God bless, and make sure you join that conversation. Peace.